Hi, Chris Searles here from Biointegrity. I want to try and show you quickly the guidance document that we put together, try and help people who are dealing with tree damage after this ice storm, and then people in general going forward. So I'm going to basically read through this thing. It's called Landscaping for Moisture Retention, and this is a guidance document that we can use to act as a contractor. But with this document, you have full access to understanding the concepts that go behind landscaping for moisture retention, which are essentially just permaculture and biosphere science on ecosystems and how they retain and circulate moisture. So again, I'm just going to read through what's here quickly and give you the overview, hopefully in a way that makes sense. And then you can go back and use this document to do your own work and your own creative work. So first of all, the techniques here achieve multiple things. And you're going to be building things to achieve things that enhance things, including rescuing trees that are damaged now, creating moisture circulation through the vegetation that's on the land. And when that happens, it creates landscape scale cooling and moisture circulation. That reverses drought over the long term. And that is the only way to protect against fire, wildfire. Fire is led by drought. And the same techniques that go into keeping things moist to prevent fire that are in this document are also things that can prevent flood and actually harvest the extreme rains we get now so that you can begin to build up landscape moisture in the short and long term. And that will also protect you from ice storms in the future, from branches that are too dry to manage the weight that they get from accumulated ice when we have these rare events now. And all of this goes into then the final two things here. These techniques are building biodiversity and wildlife habitat, which encourages the ecosystems to continue in the most productive ways. And that creates self-maintenance capacity. The planet does fine without humans. Humans need the planet, and we're scraping off so much of its natural capacity to operate that it is making drought more likely. It's creating drought hotspots, so on and so forth. So you're doing all these things on your site, and hopefully we'll also do these things in a way that encourages green infrastructure regrowth in your area and in your neighborhood. And for green infrastructure, we're really talking about all the vegetation, and of course vegetation means soil. Vegetation and soil go together. But the best way to think of what that really is when it's functional is sponge. Use a sponge to hold moisture and to wash things and so on and so forth. It can accumulate moisture and squeeze it back out again. And it's a pretty phenomenal concept when you think about it. The sponge can take on water and hold it for a while and then release it. And natural sponges, soils and vegetation can control that, just like your body controls that, including floodwaters and including getting through drought. And so regrowing natural sponge means utilizing the biosphere and ecological resources that are on your landscape to build up the ecosystem sponge. You're going to build it up with the natural materials and the debris from the recent ice storm or from whatever situation you're dealing with. And sponge, again, refers to the vegetation quality and the soil quality and how well it retains moisture. A healthy landscape is a healthy sponge. It holds and circulates moisture, and then it integrates moisture retaining materials, both alive and dead. So bark and leaves and branches and dirt and so on and so forth, at all of the scales, from the tiniest to the largest, to hold on to water and circulate water. When you do this kind of work, it'll take you a few hours to a few days, depending on how big the site and the problems are. And then you're really just looking at making sure that the site does well over the next 18 months to 5 years. You might have to water it during dry times, which is really just moistening. It's not the same as heavy watering. You're trying to create depth and living depth in the soil, and that living depth will hold the moisture. Primary components are natural debris. I won't read through these things. Erosion control, you're going to use the natural debris to create what we call wildlife walls to keep water from running off down the slope of your natural landscape. Then again, time. You just need to set these things up so they can do the work. That's both biophysical and just physical, where things break down and new life comes in based on the carbon that's available, and the other nutritional elements and the moisture elements that are available. And then again, minimal care. You might need to moisten. You will probably need to moisten these habitats you might need to water them for up to 5 years while they gain in moisture containment capacity over time. And so that depends on soil depth, the amount of life in the soil, and then the drought intensity and the weather intensity that happens over any given period of time. If you go through a 12 months of no rain, that'll have an incredible impact. If you have 12 months and you get rain every month, that'll make it a lot easier for that system to maintain itself, as an example. So again, soil depth is key. Sort of good rule of thumb is to look at 6 inches as your minimum soil depth that you're trying to achieve on your landscape over time. That doesn't mean bring in truckloads of dirt. That just means try and build up your soil. And you can do it in a variety of ways. Process, again, big picture is just observe the site. Don't start cutting things. Don't start burning things. Don't start taking things off your landscape after natural disaster. Observe what has happened and then make a plan based on what you're about to see in here. There's a little planning document here. And then just do the work. Again, it could be a few hours to a few days, and then you lightly water during dry spells over the long term. Okay, so page 2 or 3 of this thing has techniques and benefits. So the benefits are property protection, scenic beauty. You get more scenic beauty when you leave the life that's there to prosper. And then on-site natural drought reversal and cooling, and you're creating habitat, preserving and enhancing it for the other life in your landscape. So the techniques, number 1 is to care for the long term first. So all of these things that are natural are actually passive, and start with the things that are the most care oriented first. So you clear the damaged limbs off of the living limbs, and you prop up the broken limbs, and you address tree wounds where there are tears, and you group branches together to make debris walls or wildlife walls. And we talk about this as utilizing slope. You want to do everything on slope. So when you just think of a triangle, and one angle or one side of your landscape is going to be sloping one way or another. It's probably not perfectly flat like a table. And so you work with that. You try to put wildlife walls and other debris at the base of the slope where it's lowest, so that it can capture the moisture and capture the soil and the runoff. And over time, that will build up into creating this moisture containment resource. It also builds not just sponge, but soak into the landscape. So the landscape can hold on to that moisture longer and just soak it through all of the life that's there longer. You're using branches and mulch and other natural materials to create walls and terraces and sponges. And these are capturing rain and stopping runoff and erosion on your landscape. Again, just place the barriers at the bottom of the slope, as in that diagram. Third thing is to install moisture retention around your deciduous tree trunks. So in Central Texas, that's oak trees and elms and things like that. And permeable mulch. You have to be really sure not to buy mulch that is going to seal itself. Some of these mulches that I have tried that are recycled products actually serve as a moisture barrier. You need to make sure that it is permeable. And the best thing that I found, and several of the other folks that I know that are really into this stuff have found, is longleaf pine straw. You can get that from local vendors. You can get that from big box retailers. I'm pretty sure it's okay to use on your landscape. I don't know how it's affecting the landscapes it's coming off of, but we are in a drought crisis here. That's what we learned from this storm, this ice storm. And so to keep that from happening and to reverse that in the future, we're going to go ahead and use some of that longleaf pine straw that's in the stores right now to build up moisture retention around deciduous tree trunks. When you do that, they can hold on to the moisture in their bodies, just like the soil can hold on to the moisture below. The body of a tree is the tree trunk of a tree is like the vascular system of your body. It needs that moisture sort of closest to its core to move things up and down and circulate moisture inside of its own body and around the system. So when you protect the moisture retaining ability of your deciduous trees, they're the ones that move the most moisture. The evergreens hold on to moisture really well. Deciduous trees move moisture really well. So you need to help insulate them. It's tree insurance is one way to think of this. You probably noticed that a lot of the limbs that fell over that last ice storm were seriously droughted from lichen and moss and other things that they couldn't defend against, and also just the general drought in the landscape. Okay, the final thing here is to build up the sponge, the weather tolerance and property security value of the sponge. And you just do that again by building deep, biorich soils that are full of above ground vegetation, and this will regrow a landscape's ability to stop and reverse drought. You're increasing its capacity. So those are all the passive and natural things. It's kind of the big picture. We're talking about this idea that damaged trees mend, just like your body, just like your bones. Ecosystems also, they integrate tissue, just like your body when you have a cut. It's amazing to watch cuts seal up on your own body. You can also watch it happen in ecosystems. And moist ecosystems, again, just like your body, can manage weather extremes and wounds, and they can even harvest floodwaters and make use of that over the long term. You're going to nurture that property, those principles. You're nurturing your landscape until it has the capacity to self-manage through weather extremes. And you're doing that by building the biological and ecological resources on site. So over the long term, you're regrowing the sponge. Year 1, year 2, year 3 should have more moisture retention ability every year because you're collecting more materials. And those materials hold the moisture. Sponge functionality, this diagram here is just showing that the big picture from the scientific research that we've shared in the Value of Biosphere Earth series. Moisture essentially evaporates off of large bodies of water into the air, and it moves through the air. And as it comes into contact with living things, primarily vegetation, soils, and biggest of all, trees, deciduous trees, it gets captured, just like when you drink water. And that water then is in that being and circulating inside of that being's body, just like when you drink water. But unlike human beings, trees have to emit that water back out through their roots, through their pores, their bark, their stomata, so on and so forth. So they're circulating the moisture in the system and amongst the other forms of life that have the same, you could call it technology, same biology to move moisture. And this has this overall cooling effect, the sponge resource. And, okay. On this next page, this is basically the last page here. There's a suggested plan and a checklist. And so you can walk your site and clear the breaks, the things we've already talked about, and then you start making plans, determine where you're going to put walls and start building those. Then where you're going to put these moisture capturing materials, where you're going to build sponge and install that, and then go through the other stuff and maintain that wilderness, that landscape rather, as a connected wilderness system. Think of how it connects to the other ecosystems around your property and nurture moist and self-managing, intelligent, ecological life. That ecosystem going, let it do the work for you. So this checklist is just simply number 1, do your assessment and planning, walk the site, do the inventory of what you need to do and make your plan. Then number 2, clear the debris, do the limb prop-ups that's in the videos, do everything you can just to repair what's there before you start removing anything. Then utilize what's broken and fallen and the various forms of debris to build these wilderness walls for erosion stopping, moisture containment, habitat creation, so on and so forth. And you can use fallen limbs as prop-up limbs also. Then install that tree insurance, do the moisture blanket or the moisture retention material around the base of your deciduous trees. And then look at soil building over the long term and just decide which strategies to use and install those and nurture those soils. So those strategies can be adding more natural materials, such as your own compost that you make on site or your own chipped materials from your site. They can be adding purchased materials like compost and soil in a bag. Or you can start some new routines and do new practices of composting your food materials, your other biological materials, waste paper, and so on and so forth. Human waste also into your landscape, and animal waste, so forth. Anywhere you're not growing food, you can use those waste products. Do more research on how to use them. But you can begin new composting routines so that you're throwing away even fewer things and collecting more and more value and security on your site. And okay, so that's the end of this video. I hope it's recorded pretty well. There's a lot of music in here that's from the 90s and some of my least favorite songs. But doing this to help you make the right steps now and forevermore to protect and preserve the biointegrity of your landscapes for your own benefit, both in terms of property value, but also in terms of life, quality of life and lifestyle. And then for the greater good as well. These are the best ways to prevent drought for the entire community that you live in, the entire landscape you're on, and everyone that lives there all of life. So thanks for watching and have a great day. And I hope you get out there and enjoy doing some permaculture, landscaping, and biointegrity science landscape work today.